Orla. I have to say it's almost embarrassing nearly to be standing here discussing this measure. I think it's probably fair to say that if James Connolly wasn't already worn out from turning in his grave, he'd be going into a massive tailspin at the moment, because let's face it, this is a cosmetic exercise, a pretense at dealing with the poverty and the reality for workers in this country. A reality that sees half of our population on earnings of less than €27,000. Half of our population, when we know that whether somebody is fortunate or unfortunate enough to have a mortgage or to be renting, the average price of a unit is going to be about €1,200 a month. So almost half of their earnings is going to go on accommodation costs. And, you know, we have the backdrop to this discussion that Ireland has the second highest percentage of low-paid jobs across its labour force in the OECD in 2013. And Michael Taff has said that workers in hospitality and retail, two of the lowest paid sectors in the economy, would need a 20% increase to reach the average of other Central and European countries. A 20% increase to reach the average. And we're not even talking about doing anything as dramatic or radical as that. This is really just tinkering at the edges. It's a pretense at doing something after a dull term when really nothing has happened other than a growing gulf between those at the bottom and those in the middle and those at the top of our society. Now, we're told that this bill, under the provisions of this bill, as many low-paid workers as is reasonably practicable will be assisted by the Low Pay Commission. Now, what does reasonably practicable mean? Well, according to the bill, it means that the wages of low-paid workers will be incrementally increased so long as those increases don't have adverse consequences for our national competitiveness, and as long as increasing the wages of people who earn about $18,000 a year before tax, if they're lucky enough to be in a full-time job, which obviously most of them aren't, so long as increase in their wages doesn't have an impact on productivity. Now, we have to look at those low level of wages, not just in terms of the amount, but in terms of the society that we live in, and in terms of the utter decimation of the social wage and the non-existent public services in Ireland, which means that healthcare, education, parking, even if you go and visit a relative in a hospital, parking a car in the main street if you're going shopping means you've got to pay out your wages on that. And, you know, instead we're talking about wages being considered in the context of national competitiveness. Now, I would support the call of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions that we should be looking at these issues in the context of, if you like, a living wage, much more so than what's being proposed here. The race to the bottom in Irish society is not accidental. It's a deliberate product of neoliberalism, and I think what, you know, is missing from this bill is almost as telling as what's in it. Other points have been made that the cost of living will be increased, but at the same time it's not enough. We need to look at a scenario whereby, you know, I suppose we need to look at things like quality of life, precarious employment conditions, public services, unpaid care work, not just for low-paid people, but for everybody. We need an examination of what is going on in the workplace across this country. There's no one mention anywhere, not one, of the idea of a living wage. We live in a country where 60% of pilots in one of our biggest airlines are on zero-hour contracts, where Dunn's workers have been fired in retaliation for going out on strike, where the entire staff of Cleary's lost their jobs overnight 2 weeks ago. So we're talking about low pay, but we're not really delivering on any of these things because the discussion is taking place within the confines of neoliberalism, and we're dressing it up that we're making measures to address equality, but in reality, when we confirm that premise, we can't do so. And I just want to finish by reading from a worker in Ryanair I suppose, one of the fortunate ones who has a job. Not so fortunate indeed when he says, on a daily basis, we are disgustingly exploited. Every month, my duty plan shows that my duty hours, flight hours, and ground hours are exceeding the flight hours, the only kind of hours that I get paid for, by at least 30 hours. If we get sick, we don't get a penny. The company doesn't provide us with any kind of pension or health insurance whatsoever. And if we get fired, we won't get a cent either. In fact, we'd be lucky if we don't have to pay for the privilege. These are the issues that we need to be seriously addressing, not just cosmetic stunts in the run-up to an election.